Sapelo Island is a state-protected barrier island located in McIntosh County, Georgia. It is accessible only by passenger ferry operated by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. The ferry departs from the wharf at the Sapelo Island Visitor Center located in the community of Meridian. Access to the island is limited. Visitors must be participating in a tour operated by the Department of Natural Resources or by making arrangements for a day trip or overnight stay through one of the Hog Hammock residents, or finally by making reservations for a group stay at the Reynolds Mansion or the Cabretta Campground. The ferry is named after Katie Underwood, whose parents were born into slavery on Sapelo. Katie worked as a midwife from the 1920s through 1968, delivering babies for the island's residents. As the ferry pulls away from the Meridian dock and begins its 7-mile, 20-minute journey to Sapelo, all the cares of the world slip away in the ferry's wake. On our trip, we had the pleasure of meeting a group of teachers from the Macon, Georgia area who were visiting Sapelo for a women's retreat. The view from the ferry is absolutely breathtaking. Look in every direction and all you see is the beautiful salt marshes that southeast Georgia is famous for. Upon disembarking on the Sapelo dock, we were greeted by Chris, a Hog Hammock resident who, along with his wife Barbara, would serve as our host for the weekend. We arranged to rent a truck from Chris so that we could explore the island during our stay. On the ride to the house we rented, we discovered that there are few paved roads on the island, and many of those that are paved are only one lane. Whoever thinks that American-made vehicles are not reliable obviously never met the 2004 GMC pickup truck we had the pleasure of using during our stay. It wasn't pretty, probably owing to the 276,000 miles on the odometer, but it started every time and it got us where we needed to go. The home we rented on Verbo was called the Sapelo Ritz. There's a whole story behind that name, but I'll let you schedule a visit so you can learn it for yourself. While very rustic on the outside, this 3-bedroom, 2-bath house was nicely decorated on the inside. As we settled in, we got to enjoy numerous family photographs from the homeowners Rita and Bob of Brunswick. It was obvious that this wasn't just a rental property, but instead a cherished family treasure that the homeowners very graciously share with visitors. We arrived late on a Friday, so our first chance to explore the island was on Saturday morning, which dawned cold and windy. The road to the beach takes you across a very primitive wooden bridge that crosses a beautiful tidal creek. Our first stop was Nanny Goat Beach, where we got to see nature slowly changing the shape of the island one grain of sand at a time. A short distance from the beach, we found an unpaved road that led toward Doughboy Sound, where we got to see a family of dolphins feeding in the creek and egrets slowly making their way through a shallow marsh. As we neared the end of this unpaved road, we discovered the Sapelo Lighthouse that marks the harbor entrance, which leads from the open ocean to the fishing village of Darien, Georgia. From the lighthouse, you can hike a beautiful wooded trail that leads you to a creek and the remnants of a dock that once served to supply the lighthouse. Near the end of the trail, you'll find an observation platform that allows you to scan the surrounding marsh and tidal creeks. The following day, the wind subsided enough to fly the drone and capture some of the beauty of this part of the island. Later, we found another nature trail that leads through upland forests, salt marsh, and ultimately to the dunes protecting this part of the island. On our walk, we saw numerous birdhouses that were made by the Friends of Sapelo. Research shows that this not-for-profit organization has been in existence since 1995. Their mission is to make improvements to the island, such as blazing nature trails so that others can enjoy the beauty that Sapelo offers. Along this trail, you'll encounter a footbridge across a wide tidal creek. Gene Odom, a noted expert on estuaries, likens the tidal creeks to a circulatory system driven by the heart of the tide. This analogy is excellent, as tidal creeks provide fresh input to the salt marsh each high tide and remove the byproducts of growth and decay with the ebbing tide. We also got to see firsthand how nature has a way of taking dead trees and vegetation and returning them to the soil to nourish future growth. Sapelo is also home to the Reynolds Mansion. The original mansion was built in 1810 by Thomas Spalding and served as the Spalding Plantation Manor until the Civil War. The mansion fell into ruin after being damaged by the Union Army and was later purchased by Howard Coffin, a Detroit automotive engineer, in 1912. The last owner of the mansion was tobacco heir Richard Reynolds. Following his death in 1964, the mansion and most of the island's land was obtained by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. Nearby, the University of Georgia operates a marine research center, which is world-renowned for its work. The institute is located on property that once served as a dairy farm to support the Spalding plantation nearby. Anyone that's ever visited a dairy farm will probably recognize the barn that's located at the center of the Marine Institute. Since the winds had died down, we made a second visit to Nanny Goat Beach, where we took a nice long walk on the beautiful expanse of white sands at low tide. Like Cumberland Island to the south, that is known for its wild horse population, Sapelo actually boasts wild cows that roam the island freely. I assume these cows were once residents at the dairy farm nearby. We didn't see any on this trip, but we learned later that most of the cows roam the north end of the island, which is much more remote. In addition to salt marshes and maritime forest, Sapelo has the longest continuous dune system on the southeast coast. Behind the dunes are extensive meadows and freshwater ponds. On our walk, we ran across large pieces of what appeared to be the remnants of a commercial fishing vessel. We learned later that these were the parts left over from a shrimp boat that ran aground in April of 2012. Located in the heart of Sapelo is the historic community of Hog Hammock. Many of the residents of Hog Hammock are actually descendants of slaves who once worked Sapelo during the 1800s. Visitors to Sapelo will need to bring everything they'll require on their trip, as there's only one small store located on the island, and it has very limited merchandise for sale and operates with irregular hours. Here we have the Hog Hammock Community Library, founded in 2002. This building formerly served as the elementary school through 1978. Children on the island now ride the ferry to the mainland to attend class. Sapelo is also home to several churches, including the First African Baptist Church, which was first formed over 150 years ago. And just like that, our 3-day weekend was over and it was time to return to the mainland on the last ferry of the day. For anyone contemplating a visit to Sapelo, it's important to remember that the ferry does not run on federal holidays, so plan accordingly. We really enjoyed our stay on Sapelo. It was so different than most things that we've ever experienced in the past. I think it's important to mention that the McIntosh County Board of Commissioners recently approved a zoning change on Sapelo, doubling the maximum allowable home size. This is not something that local residents wanted, and they fear that this change could drive up real estate taxes as larger, more expensive homes are built on the island. This, the residents say, could force them to sell their homes and move off the island, eventually erasing the last Sea Island Gullah Geechee community that has been on Sapelo since the early 1800s. If you've ever been to Sapelo and you'd like it to remain as it is, you might consider writing the McIntosh County Board of Commissioners to let them know your feelings. Let them know you're not a voter, but you have been to the community and spent your dollars there, and you'd like to do so in the future. If you liked this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel.